Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It is 8:06 on this Wednesday, 9th day of July. Thanks for joining us on O'Connor and Company. Always a great way to start your day here in the nation's capital. It's Larry O'Connor with my good friend and filling co-host, Bethany Mandel. Bethany, plug your podcast. Go ahead.
Thank you to Alyssa, who's one of our listeners, who the second that I plugged the Mom Wars Substack, she instantly subscribed. So thank you, Alyssa. The Substack and the podcast are both called The Mom Wars. And speaking of moms, our next guest is literally my surrogate mother. When I was in the emergency room all day yesterday, do you know how hard it was not to text her and say, what do I do? But she was releasing a best-selling new book, so I did it.
Yeah. You can't text her on launch day, on publish day, but now you can ask her all those things. Let's sell some books. While we're selling your podcast, Bethany, let's sell some books. It's called Butler, The Untold Story of the Near Assassination of Donald Trump and the Fight for America's Heartland. And, you know, there's a litmus test of people who work in politics and media. And because Salena Zito is the kindest, most wonderful, most professional person you'll meet. And if for some reason you have something negative to say about Salena Zito, then I know everything I need to know about you. She joins us now. Salena, congratulations on this triumph.
Oh, that is so kind of you. And Bethany, I would have totally answered your text.
I know, that's why I didn't text you.
True.
And that is why the litmus test is if you don't love Salena Zito, then you're dead to me.
There's something wrong with you, yeah. So, Salena, listen, famously, we already know that you were there that day in Butler. You were right there, in fact. You were saved from flying bullets and shrapnel as the bullets were flying at this assassination attempt of Donald Trump. But what we didn't know about your story at the time that you reveal in the book is how thoughtful and concerned the president was about your safety.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next morning, July 14th, I get a phone call at dark 30. I mean, it wasn't dark, it's summer, but, you know, it was early. and this, you know, very distinctive, very booming voice is on the other end. Salena Zito, this is President Donald Trump. Like I don't know that, right? and he says, first, are you okay? Is your daughter okay? Is your son-in-law okay? And I am really sorry for not doing the interview yesterday. And I did something that my parents, when they read the book, find out, which I think they already have. I haven't talked to them for now 12 hours. I swore like a truck driver and said, are you bleeping kidding me, sir? You were shot. I wasn't. But it was the first of 7 very emotional, very powerful phone calls that we had that day. And he called me several times. I think a lot of that connective tissue between us in that moment had to do with we both knew each other. We both respected each other, and we both had been, to varying different degrees, through a traumatic experience. Yeah. Now, we all know if we have a traumatic experience and we try to explain it to a spouse or, you know, a loved one, a family member, if they weren't there, there's a missing piece. But if someone was there with you, it's different. And I believe that's why he called me. And these conversations were very profound and really gave me an insight in a deeper level into who he is, was in that moment, but who he knew he had to be after that moment.
So this is the thing that makes you so powerful, and why when Larry and I are joking that there are people out there who don't like you, this is why. Because you have this incredible window into President Trump because he trusts you and because he respects you, as anyone should, as an incredible journalist, but also as a deeply good person. And one of the things that I found most interesting from your book, because I pre-ordered it the day that the pre-order was available, was how many times President Trump talked to you about God. He said, and one of the other things I love about you is that you gave him the space to have these sort of internal conversations and these internal revelations. When I think of Donald Trump, I don't think of him as a particularly religious man, but you quote him again and again and again. and say this was the hand of God. The fact that he turned his head when he did, and I felt that from the moment that this happened, that this was undeniably the hand of God. And I think, the greatest portrayal of God's grace and God's power was that morning in Butler. Whether you like Donald Trump or not, you have to admit that this would have triggered a civil war had this assassin's bullet hit its target. Can you tell me a little bit more about these religious conversations that you had with Trump and what that revealed to you about who he is as a human being?
Absolutely. So I think sometimes in society we define religiosity based on some sort of our personal view of what religiosity is. But faith is a very personal and profound conversation we have within ourselves. And so, as you said, people don't particularly think of him as a very religious person, but it doesn't mean he didn't have faith. And it doesn't mean there isn't a belief in a higher power. And as he and I are talking, and that's why I gave him space, I think other reporters would have pushed him. Did I make the right decision? For me, I did. Other people might look at this and say, you should have pushed him, you should have grilled him. But he came to terms in those conversations about God because he said, Salena, I have no explanation for why I put that chart down. I never put the chart down. Mm-hmm. I have no explanation as to why I turned my head around. I never turn away from the crowd. The only explanation to me is the presence of God, the hand of God. And so what does that mean? Well, for me, it means I have purpose that I didn't understand that I had before. And that gets to the moment when I ask him why he said, fight, fight, fight. Mm. And he says to me, in that moment, I was not Donald Trump. I was a president of the United States, or at least a former one, possibly the next one. And I had an obligation to the people in the country that are watching this, but also the people there so that they don't panic, to show resiliency, to show strength, to show that as a country, we always fight. We have grit. We are exceptional. And that was my obligation in that moment.
It's such an important insight and revelation. We sort of all figured that and we felt it at the moment, but to hear him actually explain that to you is so important to memorialize in your book. The book is called Butler. You need to get it. It's about more than just this assassination attempt, by the way. There's more meaning in the name of this book, and we're going to get into that in a moment. But that aspect, that sort of knowing that he is a symbol as a president and as a presidential candidate, I remember he got criticized for not wanting to wear a mask during the pandemic. But I completely understood that because it would have been a sign of weakness. It wouldn't have projected that resilience and that strength that I think that a president should project. And it is strange, I think, in American politics, Salena, that in some way a president wanting to show strength is criticized. It makes him worthy of criticism. That in some way, you need to show your weakness to be an effective president. It's quite the opposite. Why? What is that about American politics? Maybe I'm just, too much from the Reagan era that I want my president to be a president.
Yeah, there is a level of expectation among our cultural curators in legacy media, right? The people that control the narrative because they have the most power, that, it's a bad thing to show strength, if you're a man, to show masculinity, right? And I think that's wrong-headed because the very ethos of who we are is based on grit and strength and perseverance, and it is what has been leading us since George Washington, and
That's right.
And we didn't see that in Biden.
That's right.
We can criticize Biden for all kinds of policy decisions. I understand that. But also there was a weakness there that was very profound and even unnerved his staunchest supporters. Yeah. And seeing that strength in Trump that day reminded people of what our potential is.
All right, we got a couple
Right?
more questions for Salena. Stay right there. It's just going to be a minute. We got to check on traffic. The book, this is a great time for you to utilize the sale on Prime Day on Amazon and get your copy of Butler, The Untold Story of the Near Assassination of Donald Trump and the Fight for America's Heartland by our guest, Salena Zito, who we've got more questions for in a moment.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Donald Trump has said of our guest, author Salena Zito, she understands you people and me better than we do. And that's true. In fact, that's why this book is called Butler, because it's not about just what happened in Butler. It's about the people of Butler. It's about the battleground of where this campaign really took place and where the presidency was won for Donald Trump. And you do report on these communities better than anyone, Salena. So zoom out a little bit. Beyond just this moment, this day in July of last year, what made 2024 different, or for that matter, similar to the 2016 campaign you reported so effectively on?
Well, Donald Trump has an intuition about people in a way that I've never really seen before. Maybe Bill Clinton had a little bit of that, in his time, but because of his, how he is now, that's now missing. And this book is also about the people in the places that I call the middle of somewhere, that both parties have consistently dismissed and or taken for granted for decades. And he understands about going to those places. So it's about places like East Palestine. It's about places like Butler, Pennsylvania. There's only been one other president that has ever campaigned there, and that was JFK. It's also places like Erie, Pennsylvania. So the book takes you along after that day in Butler. It also makes you understand in a very granular, very contextual way why these voters matter. The voters that don't matter, no offense to anybody that lives in D.C. or New York, where our media is located, and who often our media is speaking to, they don't matter because their electoral vote doesn't count. But places in Butler, Pennsylvania do, or Luzerne County. So I take the reader through what they missed, what was happening in 2024. I can remember just wanting to stomp my feet and scream, you guys, you're not paying attention. It's not even close in Pennsylvania. It's not even close in Wisconsin. And you aren't reporting what is happening.
Yeah. I remember you saying that to me and talking to me all night long, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I one of the, you're not just a Trump whisperer, which again is why a lot of people hate you, because you're not just a Trump whisperer. You're a whisperer to all of these people in these, forgotten heartland parts of America. But I think that you also have a really incredible, insightful relationship that is growing with our Vice President, J.D. Vance. And you quote him in the book in a really beautiful way, because you're not just you're not giving us a window into Donald Trump, but you're also giving us a window into the vice president. And you, towards the end of the book, you're at the RNC, and you're talking to Vance, and he says it's obviously a little bittersweet. Bitter because Corey Compatore is not with us, but sweet because there's so much energy and people are so excited. You are the predictor, and so I want you to right now state out a claim. What do you think 2028 is going to look like as the primary field is solidifying? Who are the people that you think are going to be at the top of the ticket for the Republican nomination?
If it was today, I would say J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, hands down.
Yeah.
Those two have shown to be very competent in their positions, very willing to speak very bluntly and plainly, different ways. JD has a lot of Appalachia in him, right? He also has a lot of Yale in him. And it's a really interesting combination.
Yeah.
And Marco Rubio, he's the OG of the Tea Party, right? I covered him in 2009, 2010 when he was taking on the establishment Republican Party and the Democrats in Florida. This is a very poised, very smart, very deliberate man who also is right there at the top, and he's earned the confidence and the respect of the president in so much as J.D. Vance has. There's two very talented young men right there that are the future of the conservative populist coalition.
You know, you use the term earned right there, and it's true with me. I was skeptical of Marco Rubio as Secretary of State, but boy, oh boy, has he earned respect and support now based on just these first 6 months. I don't know why we sort of fell into I know why. Bethany and I both have mutual acquaintances that we used to work with who were really mean to you, fellow journalists. We keep dwelling on people who don't like Salena Zito. Not normal people. They're journalists. They're reporters who don't like her. They don't matter. But I want to talk about that only in, again, not their opinion of you, but that they got this wrong again, and about journalism in general, because you are an outlier, because you don't live in Manhattan or D.C., because you cover this from the perspective of the heartland. And you talk about this in the book, that just days after this assassination attempt, we saw legitimate, respected journalists sort of blaming Trump. You know, using words like, well, you know, what do you expect when you use the rhetoric that he uses? I mean, it was one of the darkest moments in American journalism that they were blaming Donald Trump for enticing an assassination's attempt.
Yep.
Yeah, three things happened in successive row that really bothered me. First, they denied that it happened. They denied, said it was glass from the teleprompter.
That's right, the conspiracy theory about the teleprompter glass.
And then they said, to your point, that he deserved it. And the most egregious one of all, 3-4 days later when Biden drops out, that story's gone. Nobody's writing about that story, right? And this is a monumental moment in American history. And people don't understand the breadth. They will when they read the book, because the book takes you, boom, we keep going. Right, and we keep seeing what's happening, and they completely ignored it. And I remember towards the end of the book, I go to the Madison Square Garden event, then go to a Puerto Rican town in Pennsylvania, in the Lehigh Valley, and Berks County, right around there, and everyone's predicting, because the garbage comment, everyone of Puerto Rican descent is not going to vote for him. Yeah. And there's going to be a massive protest. Well, I showed up, and there were 6 people protesting who were not from Pennsylvania, and every single person that I interviewed kept saying to me, because they had no idea who I was, like, why? That's so insulting. Do you think we can't take a joke? What do you think, like, Puerto Ricans can't take a joke? Yeah. And I walked away from that saying, they don't get it. Mm-hmm. This isn't changing anything. They don't get, more importantly, they don't understand people. They come in, they fly in, they make assumptions based on their experiences. And to your point about why I understand things, it's not because I'm particularly brilliant. It's because of geography. I live in Western Pennsylvania. It's also because of experience. I've been a waitress. I have been a shampoo girl. I've worked in a sewage treatment plant. I've been the cafeteria lady. My experiences and my geography help me understand people better than someone understands people, covering people from the middle of the country whose experiences include a very nice college and university and a really nice zip code.
And now you are a second-time best-selling author. Your book is number 28 on Amazon right now, and everyone needs to go to Amazon and pick it up. Salena Zito Butler.
Yeah.
It is an incredible read. And
get that book and send a message to the elites in media and in Washington and Manhattan. Salena Zito, she speaks for us. And, so much for a hard-hitting interview with Salena.
Never a chance with me and Salena.
Sorry, we're both in the fan club. You know that, Salena. Great talking with you, and congratulations on the book.
Love you guys. Thank you so much.
Coming up, an important conversation with David Bernstein, author of Woke Anti-Semitism, about how anti-Semitism has infected the Democratic Party. We'll get into it next.
WMAL-FM Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 8:37, O'Connor and Company. Thank you so much for letting us into your morning routine. It's Larry O'Connor with Bethany Mandel this morning. Good morning, Bethany. Thanks for being here all day.
Thank you for having me. This has been such a joyful way to spend my day, and everyone can hear me again tomorrow unless you kick me off.
Yeah, but we'll talk. Joining us now, David Bernstein, founder of North American Values Institute and author of Woke Anti-Semitism, How a Progressive Ideology Harms Jews. David, thanks for joining us. I think it's a question we're constantly asking, support of Israel, just in terms of their right to exist, and condemnation of radical terrorists like Hamas, who executed the October 7th massacre. They used to be a given in American politics across party lines. What's happened? How the latest polls show now that the majority of Democrats don't support the state of Israel and are open to Hamas's demands post October 7th.
Yeah, well, a radical wing of the Democratic Party, you might call it the progressive wing, has really grown in size and grown in prominence within the Democratic coalition. So at one point, you might have had the more level-headed moderates who would speak out against this, and there still are some of them out there, but all too often these people reign supreme, and they're dominating the discourse within the Democratic Party on these issues. And so I'm afraid that we've seen a real loss of support on that side of the aisle.
So a lot of what you do at Navi is education-based. And so there was this incredible report that was in the Free Beacon about how Governor Shapiro, who I think a lot of people, myself included, thought positively about when it came to anti-Semitism, he refused to keep meeting with these parents in Pennsylvania. Can you tell us a little bit more about, what Navi uncovered about what's going on in Pennsylvania and what the governor's response has been there?
Yeah, so we identified a teacher in the Philadelphia school district who agreed off the record to share a social studies curriculum that was developed by the school district. And it was really egregious. I mean, it was basically schooling kids in the oppressor ideology and had very little critical thinking at all. And of course, when you do this, you basically train people to see the world in this binary lens. And Jews are often viewed as the powerful actors, and Israel is viewed as the powerful state, and everybody else is oppressed. And that's what we had in Philadelphia. So we've been urging the governor to take action against this and to speak out, but he hasn't really done as much as he could so far. There's no question, I believe his heart's in the right place, but that's not what matters. What matters is what he does and he says. And I think he's probably, thinking a lot about the progressive wing, and he doesn't want to alienate them, and he might have other political aspirations, and so far he hasn't really stepped up to the plate on this in the way we would hope.
Well, and beyond Shapiro, the other underlying storyline here is that public school curriculum in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, and in other states, sadly, have sort of been infiltrated with this slow creep, not so slow anymore, of anti-Semitism, of insulting and disgusting characterizations of the state of Israel, and this idea that this is part of education. This is actually supposed to be an objective educational experience, but the teachers union and their influence on the curriculum has actually allowed for this to occur.
Yeah, a few years ago we saw this as primarily but not exclusively a California phenomenon, and then we started to see it in other schools. We thought it's going to likely go from state to state, but instead they were able to get it in individual districts and sort of bypass the states. So we have to now fight this in districts across the country where you have a radical group of teachers, very often teachers union, as you say, who are pushing this agenda. They may be a small minority in some cases of teachers, but that's all it takes. They're very well organized. They're very dead set on indoctrinating kids. They've gone through teachers' college programs that teach them to, quote-unquote, decolonize the curriculum, which is basically a way of saying to be hostile toward anything that smacks of Western values or American values. And they're able to then use their activism to get their way in a lot of school districts in a lot of classrooms around the country, and we've got to start pushing back against it. Not just because it breeds anti-Semitism, which it does, but because it's anti-American and breeds anti-American sentiment. People have to really wake up to this because it's not going in a good direction.
Yeah. One of the other things that is really concerning me, speaking of teachers' unions, is the dropping of the UFT, dropping the ADL, which, again, not an organization I'm particularly a fan of, but they're dropping the ADL. At the same time, I'm hearing whispers, I don't know if it's been announced publicly yet, but it will be soon, that the teachers' union in New York City is set to endorse anti-Semitic socialist candidate for mayor, Mamdani. What is there that parents can do to fight back against this behemoth of anti-Semitism that is coming, rolling through the K through 12 system?
Yeah, so when cases that are that far gone, like you're starting to see in New York or you saw in Chicago, you've really got to replace the whole lot of political figures. It's not enough just to fight school by school. I mean, if I'm a parent, I'm still going to stick up for my kids for sure. But it's going to be very important that we teachers unions in these cases, particularly in Chicago, became so dominant, and they basically ran an extremist mayor for mayor, and you're seeing some of this same dynamics play out in New York. In that case, you have to do what the Chicago Jewish community did, which is to create a new body. It's called the Common Ground Collective, that's dedicated to putting mainstream candidates up in elections and to raise money for them and to make sure that they're able to push back against these radical candidates that have gained so much ground. I think that's what you got to do in the end in these places. In other places that are more like suburban districts that are very purple or have moderate elements and more extreme elements, then you can fight the good fight in your local district, and you can
David,
fight the good fight by running for school board.
We've seen in Montgomery County, Maryland, through Bethany Mandel's activism, that parents can make a difference in these curricula. If any of our local parents see some questionable material in their books that the kids are getting from the public schools, what do you suggest they do? Should they reach out to your organization?
They can absolutely reach out to my organization. We have a toolkit that's on our website, navivalues.org, that really helps you recognize all the signs of this, and then you can push back forcefully. Bethany is one of the people who did really an amazing job demonstrating what this looks like and also ran for school board. We need more people to do that, and we need them to call it out. And you don't have to be a perfect voice to call it out. You just have to call it out and bring other people with you and find allies that can help you do it.
All right. Thank you for that, David Bernstein, Navi. Great talking with you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
It's 8:43.
WMAL's Vince Colonnese, weekdays at noon on 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
It's time for Critter News, and of course anything having to do with alligator Alcatraz is by definition a critter story because, well, there are alligators, but there's a new angle to this. There is some concern apparently about the illegal alien criminals who are being housed at alligator Alcatraz, and by the way, if you're concerned as well and you are in the country illegally, there is an app through the Department of Homeland Security where you can self-deport, and you'll have your flight paid for, you'll get some money, you can get out of here on your own, you don't have to worry about it. Local television station connected with one of the detainees down there, and Cut 16A, he made a stunning revelation.
The mosquitoes, he says, are the size of elephants.
I think that he may be guilty of hyperbole there.
Maybe just a little. I would like to know who I can complain about the mosquitoes on my front lawn to, since I'm not an alligator Alcatraz, or do only illegal immigrants being detained get to complain about mosquitoes?
That's right. I'm sorry. We live in the Mid-Atlantic region here, where
the swamp.
Stones throw from the Chesapeake Bay. We got our own mosquito problems. I don't hear NBC calling us for our complaints, let alone with a translator.
I'm happy to help. No, I mean, I listen, I feel very badly for people who are mistreated in prisons. They're not perfect. We owe it to people to have them have but mosquitoes, I'm sorry, they're not the size of elephants, and you will be fine if that's your biggest complaint.
And you're in Florida. It's like whether you're in a detention camp or whether you're at the beach, you're going to deal with mosquitoes.
Yeah.
Sorry, man.
Yeah, no, sorry.
8:53.